The pan was sizzling on the stove, the smell of garlic and olive oil filling my small apartment. And for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't checking my bank app while I cooked. I wasn't calculating if I had enough for the electric bill after sending the payment. My phone lit up on the counter. No hey, no how are you doing, honey? Just my mother's voice, flat and demanding, asking where her money was. That was the moment I realized I wasn't a daughter to her anymore. I was just a broken ATM. My name is Sarah. I'm 28 years old, and I spent the last decade of my life thinking that being the strong one was a badge of honor. I thought if I worked the double shifts, if I skipped the vacations, if I paid for the new roof and the broken fridge, eventually they would see me. I never thought my own blood would treat me like a business transaction they forgot to process. I'm still shaking while I type this out. It's hard to admit how much you can let people take before you finally break. If you've ever been the one in your family who gives until there's nothing left while everyone else just grabs, please subscribe and let me know in the comments. I really need to know I'm not the only one who has felt this invisible. It helps more than you know. Growing up, we weren't broken. We were just a normal family in a quiet neighborhood. A modest house, a front yard my mom, Evelyn, tried to keep neat, and a hallway lined with photos of us smiling. But looking back at those photos now, those smiles feel like a lie. My childhood really ended when I was 6 and my dad died. One day, the house was full of his humming and the smell of his coffee, and the next, it was just silent. Everything felt hollow after that. My mom eventually remarried a man named Michael. He wasn't my biological dad, but he was the only person who actually saw me. He noticed when I stopped talking. He noticed when I started doing my own laundry because I didn't want to be a burden. When my younger brother Noah was born, the entire world shifted. Suddenly, my needs were flexible and Noah's were urgent. I learned early that if I wanted peace, I had to be easy. I had to be the one who didn't complain. Michael tried to balance it. He'd sit through my school plays and drive me to classes just so I wouldn't feel forgotten. But my mom's focus was always on Noah. Noah was sensitive. Noah was special. Noah needed more. I didn't realize then that needing more was just a nice way of saying he was being raised to believe the world owed him everything, and I was the one who was going to have to pay the bill. But as I stood in my kitchen, listening to my mother demand her allowance, I realized the normalcy I thought we had was just a carefully maintained illusion. And the worst part? The betrayal didn't even start with that phone call. It started months ago in a way I never saw coming. The first red flag didn't feel like a warning. It felt like a request for help. After Michael passed away suddenly a few years ago, the buffer was gone. He was the one who reminded my mom she had 2 children, not just one. Without him, the calls started almost immediately. Small things at first. Sarah, can you help with the groceries this week? Things are tight. I didn't hesitate. I loved them. I thought that's what families did. But then the request became a schedule. It wasn't, can you help anymore? It was, the money hasn't cleared yet. Every time I visited that house, the air felt heavier. It wasn't just the grief of losing Michael, it was the weight of unspoken expectations. My mom stopped asking how my job was going or if I was seeing anyone. Instead, she'd lead with a sigh and a comment about the rising costs of utilities. I'd look over at Noah, now in his early 20s, lounging on the sofa with a new headset, shouting at a video game. I'd ask why he wasn't working, why he wasn't helping with the bills, and my mother would jump in before he could even blink. He's figuring things out, Sarah. He's sensitive. The world is different now than it was for you. I felt this weird, cold knot starting to form in my stomach. Why was it always different for me? I had worked 2 jobs through college. I had skipped trips with friends because I couldn't afford the gas. I had built a life out of grit and sheer willpower. But in that house, my strength wasn't something to be proud of, it was an excuse to use me. I remember fixing the leaky sink one Saturday while Noah slept until noon. I looked at my hands, covered in grime, and then at my mom, who was hovering near Noah's door with a tray of toast so she wouldn't disturb his rest. I felt a flicker of something, not anger yet, just deep, bone-weary confusion. I was being repositioned. I wasn't a daughter visiting home. I was a contractor who didn't get paid. "Is he even looking for a job, Mom?" I asked quietly. She turned on me, her eyes narrowing. "You don't understand him, Sarah. You never have. You've always been so self-sufficient. You don't know what it's like to struggle the way he does." The irony of her saying that to the person currently paying her mortgage didn't even register with her. I just nodded and went back to the sink. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself that once Noah found himself, things would go back to normal. But then I found something in the kitchen drawer that proved Noah had already found exactly what he wanted, and it involved making sure I stayed exactly where I was. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something. Why was my mom so protective of Noah's laziness? It didn't make sense, even for a sensitive kid. A few weeks later, I was over at the house, helping my mom organize some old files Michael had left behind. She had gone to the store to get Noah's favorite snacks, leaving me alone in the dining room with stacks of envelopes and folders. I wasn't snooping, I really wasn't. But a brightly colored folder caught my eye. It was from a local law office. My heart did a weird little skip. I opened it thinking maybe it was something about Michael's estate that had been overlooked. Instead, I found a draft for a new will. I sat there, the paper trembling in my hand. My mother had gone to a lawyer to ensure that everything, the house, Michael's remaining savings, the family heirlooms, would go entirely to Noah. My name wasn't just secondary, it wasn't there at all. I felt this sudden, sharp chill, like someone had poured ice water down my spine. I started thinking about all the money I'd sent over the last 3 years, the loans for Noah's car, the money for the new roof. I was literally funding the maintenance of an asset that was being legally kept away from me. I was paying for a house I would eventually be kicked out of so my brother could live there for free. My mind started racing. Was this why she kept telling me I was strong? Because if I was strong, I didn't need an inheritance? If I was independent, it was okay to strip me of my family's legacy to provide a safety net for the son who refused to even lift a finger? I heard the front door open, the jingle of keys, the sound of my mom's cheerful voice calling out to Noah. I shoved the paper back into the folder and stood up, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard it hurt. I looked at the kitchen table, the same table where I used to do my homework by candlelight when the power got cut after my dad died, while my mom spent our last few dollars on a toy for Noah to stop him from crying. It had always been this way. I just hadn't wanted to see it. I had been acting like a temporary solution to a permanent problem. I walked out of the room, my face a mask of calm, but inside something was hardening. I realized that my family didn't love me for who I was. They loved me for what I could do for them. "Everything okay, honey?" my mom asked, dropping a bag of groceries on the counter. "Fine," I said, my voice sounding like it belonged to someone else. "Just tired." But I wasn't just tired. I was starting to see the smoking gun, and I knew that if I looked a little closer at Noah's struggles, I was going to find something even worse. I spent the next week in a daze. Every time my phone buzzed with a text from my mom, usually a photo of a broken appliance or a subtle hint about Noah needing new shoes for a job interview that would never happen, I felt a physical wave of nausea. I decided I needed to know the full truth. If I was going to blow up my life, I needed to know I wasn't crazy. I stopped by the house unannounced on a Tuesday morning. My mom was at a doctor's appointment. I knew Noah would be home. I let myself in with my spare key, the house smelling of stale air and the cheap incense Noah liked. I walked toward his room, planning to just, I don't know, talk to him? Confront him? The door was cracked open. I could hear him laughing. He wasn't figuring things out. He was on a voice call, his voice loud and arrogant. "Yeah, man, Sarah's sending another $2,000 this month for the emergency repair," he chuckled. "Mom told her the water heater blew. We're actually going to Vegas next weekend. Sarah's basically my personal scholarship fund. She's so obsessed with being the good daughter, she doesn't even check the receipts." I stood in the hallway, my breath hitching in my throat. My hands were shaking so violently I had to press them against the wall to keep from making noise. It wasn't just my mom, it was him. They were in it together. My mother wasn't a victim of Noah's laziness, she was his partner in crime. They were actively lying to me, inventing emergencies to milk me for every cent I earned. "She thinks she's so much better than us," Noah continued, his tone turning sour. "Always acting so capable. Well, if she's so capable, she can afford to support the family. It's the Sarah tax. That's what Mom calls it." The Sarah tax? I backed away from the door, my chest feeling like it was being crushed by a physical weight. The sensitive brother was a con artist. The grieving mother was a thief. Every hour of overtime I'd worked, every meal I'd skipped to make sure they were okay, it was all a joke to them. I was the family's cash cow, and they were laughing while they led me to the slaughter. I walked out of the house, my vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall. I got into my car and just sat there, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I thought about the will. I thought about the Sarah tax. I thought about Michael and how disappointed he would be to see what had happened to the family he tried to protect. But more than anything, I felt a strange, cold clarity. The sadness was gone. The heartbreak had crystallized into something sharp and dangerous. They thought I was strong? Fine. They were about to find out exactly how strong a woman becomes when she has nothing left to lose. I didn't call them. I didn't scream. I didn't send a long emotional text explaining how much they'd hurt me. I knew exactly what would happen if I did. My mom would play the heart condition card, and Noah would play the victim card. They would gaslight me until I apologized for catching them. No. If they wanted to treat me like a business transaction, I would respond like one. I went home and opened my laptop. I logged into my bank account and looked at the recurring transfers. I looked at the Noah's car payment, the property tax fund, and the emergency monthly allowance. With a few clicks, I canceled every single one of them. I didn't just stop the future payments. I moved my entire savings into a new account they didn't have the info for. Then, I called my cell phone provider and removed them from my family plan. I called the streaming services, the gym memberships, the Amazon Prime account, anything they were piggybacking on. I cut the cords one by one. The silence that followed was terrifying. For 3 years, my identity had been tied to being the provider. Without it, I felt like I was floating. But then, I looked around my apartment. I saw the furniture I'd bought on sale, the books I'd read to escape my reality, the life I'd built despite them, not because of them. I spent the next 30 days in a state of quiet preparation. I knew the Sarah tax was due on the first of the month. I knew exactly how long it would take for the panic to set in. I redirected all that money, thousands of dollars, into a high-yield savings account for a down payment on a house of my own, a house where they would never have a key. I also did something else. I contacted the lawyer who had drafted my mother's will. Since I had paid for the legal consultation, another emergency fee my mom had asked for, I was technically the client on record for the payment. I informed them that I would no longer be subsidizing any future legal work for Evelyn. I felt like a spy in my own life. I visited them once more during that month, acting completely normal. I watched Noah brag about his upcoming business venture while wearing a shirt I had unconsciously paid for. I watched my mom look at me with that patronizing pity, thinking I was still her oblivious little worker bee. I smiled. I ate the dinner I'd paid for, and then I went home and waited for the calendar to turn. 30 days to the day. The phone call came at 6:15 p.m. I was searing a steak, the sound of the sizzle loud in the quiet of my kitchen. I picked up on the third ring. "Where's my money?" My mother didn't even say hello. The mask didn't just slip, it disintegrated. Her voice was sharp, entitled, and filled with a venom I hadn't heard since I was a child. "There's no problem with the bank, Mom," I said, my voice as cold as a winter morning. I canceled it. All of it. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. I could hear her breathing, heavy and ragged. Then, the explosion. "You what? You can't do that. We have bills. Noah has his car payment due tomorrow. Are you trying to ruin us?" "I'm not doing anything to you, Mom," I replied, turning off the stove. "I'm just stopping what I'm doing for you. There's a difference." "You selfish, ungrateful girl," she screamed. "After everything I've done for you, I gave you life. I raised you." "And I've been paying you back for that life for 10 years, I shot back, "but I'm done. I know about the will. I know about the Sarah tax. I heard Noah laughing about the Vegas emergency. You aren't my family. You're a pair of parasites." Suddenly, another voice cut in. Noah. He must have been listening on speaker. "What's your problem, Sarah? You're rich. You have a great job. You don't need the money like we do. You're just being a bitch because you think you're better than us." "I don't think I'm better, Noah," I said, a strange sense of peace washing over me. "I just think I'm finished. You want to go to Vegas? Find a job. You want to keep the house? Figure it out, because from this second on, Sarah is officially out of business." "You can't abandon us," my mother wailed, her voice shifting into that rehearsed, wounded sob. "I never loved you any less. I just knew you were strong. No one needs me." "Then he can have you," I said softly, "but he can't have my money, and neither can you. Don't call me again." She screamed my name, a raw, ugly sound, but I didn't wait to hear the rest. I ended the call and immediately blocked both of them. I blocked the cousins I knew they'd use to guilt-trip me. I blocked the family friends. I sat down at my table and ate my steak. It was the best thing I'd tasted in years. The air in my apartment felt light. The crushing weight on my chest? It was gone. I had finally stopped paying the price for a love that was never actually there. It's been 6 months since that night. The fallout was spectacular, but not in the way they expected. Without my Sarah tax propping up their lifestyle, the house of cards collapsed almost immediately. It turns out that when you don't have a daughter to pay for emergencies, you actually have to be responsible. Noah lost his car within 2 months. He tried to sue me for emotional distress and breach of verbal contract, but no lawyer would take the case when they realized there was no contract, only a sister who had finally grown a spine. The epic revenge, though, it wasn't anything I did to them. It was what happened because I stopped doing things. My mother was forced to sell the family house because she couldn't afford the property taxes and the repairs I had been silently covering. Because of the way she'd structured the deed to favor Noah, a huge chunk of the sale went to his debts. They had to move into a tiny 2-bedroom apartment on the far side of town. My mom now works part-time at a craft store, and Noah finally discovered what a 9 to 5 feels like. He's working warehouse shifts. As for me, I used that down payment I'd saved to buy a beautiful sun-drenched condo. There are no broken appliances that aren't my own. There is no Sarah tax. The final lesson I learned is this. Love isn't measured by how much you're willing to bleed for someone. If someone only loves you when your hands are full of gifts, they don't love you at all. They love the gifts. I still have the photo of Michael and me. Sometimes I look at it and I think he'd be proud. He didn't raise me to be a martyr, he raised me to be a survivor. And surviving sometimes means leaving the people you love behind so you don't drown with them. I'm free, and for the first time in 28 years, I'm finally living for myself. If you're still waiting for a sign to stop paying the price for someone else's choices, this is it. You aren't heartless for choosing yourself, you're just finally honest.